Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to the Level Up Hour here on OpenShift TV. I am Chris Short, executive producer, host with the most, whatever you want to call me, of OpenShift TV. I am joined by the one and only, the illustrious Langdon White. Langdon, how are you this morning?
I'm pretty good. We, our typical coffee complaint, but otherwise generally okay. I will say we prefer the Latin, the hostess with the mostest.
Yes,
for John Oliver, but not to steal too badly. This is the Level Up Hour. In case anyone is unfamiliar, we have some very ugly slides that we like to share.
They're not ugly. Don't call them ugly.
Okay, all right.
The audience says so. That's different. If you say so,
exactly.
It's like calling your, it's like picking favorite children.
Right.
Can't do that.
Yeah, well, at least not to their faces. Or if you're going to pick a favorite child to their face, pick one of the other ones.
Well, we all it's a running joke in my wife's family that the middle sister is always the favorite sister, no matter what, somehow.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I hear that. All right, so this is the Level Up Hour where we talk about, lots of random stuff, for example, but also, more importantly, we talk about containers. We talk about why, even though it is this big hype thing, it's actually very, very useful, unlike a lot of things that get really hyped up. And it might even be useful to you as like a system administrator. They're not like just for developers. They're also not even just for production. Like I use them all the time to do development with. There's even a plugin to VS Code, for example, that does these remote containers where you can kind of develop inside a container. I don't know about all of you, but I don't like it in my like laptop all crufty.
Yeah.
So as a result, I do everything in a container.
Use package managers. Don't use anything outside of the
Although speaking of that, we will have an example of where that's where that is 100% true, and one of my pet peeves about the container world, and related directly to package management. So if I forget to mention it, you should definitely ask me.
I will.
All right, so I'm Langdon White, and you can find me on Twitter at Langdon with a 1. And this is Chris Short. You can find him on Twitter by Chris Short with 2 S's, 1 C, 1 T. I just like to make
2 S's like Mississippi. No, that's confusing.
No, that's true.
That's 2 sets of 2 S's. It's only
that has a whole song that goes with it, though.
That's right.
Although I also have always liked Connecticut, to remember how to spell Connecticut.
Yes, that's literally how I spell it out in my head. I say that.
Yeah. Yes. So you can also find us on Discord. Join our Discord channel, which is in the chat as well as on the screen. And then let's see, for today's show, we are going to be focusing a little bit on using OpenShift serverless, primarily as I was fooling around with something and realized that this was a great example of a serverless function and why a serverless function is useful. But there's a lot more to, or arguably more to serverless. So we'll talk about some of that stuff as well. As usual, you can find the show notes at the episode's GitHub repo.
I should have made that a shortcut. I have not yet.
Oh, yeah. I also just realized that I don't have my cheat sheet of links, which I normally do.
That's fair. I've got it I got it. Don't worry. I just got to get it.
Alrighty. So that is the show notes, and you can also usually find them on Twitter. I think I tweeted out about them last week, I think. So you can find them out there too. And that is the end of the sharing time of slides. We do have, some shows we tend to focus more on interviews. Some shows we tend to focus more on kind of actual code or demos or whatever you want to call them. Today is more of one of those coding episodes.
Yes.
So first up, let's talk a little bit about serverless. When many people say the term serverless, what they mean is this idea of just basically a blob of code that gets run on demand. In the OpenShift serverless product, I don't know what do we call or like operator, like whatever we call operators when we add them onto.
It's technically a product, but yeah,
okay.
It's an operator in OpenShift that you install. Yeah,
we have three what I kind of think of as like pillars to the serverless product, and I kind of mentioned two of them in that sentence about how I run the function. So the first thing is, and arguably the most important part, is this idea of what they call serving, which is the idea of only consuming resources on demand.
Right.
So in other words, when you're not using the function or using the feature set of the code, it goes to zero, right? There's nothing running there aside from kind of the infrastructure stuff, and it just idles in the background, or it doesn't even idle, it just turns off. Yeah. This, as I discovered going through this process, can make debugging difficult, but this is something, one of the things I learned going through this process. I have a number of bugs I would like to file, both from a user experience perspective, but also just actual bugs.
Well, if I remember correctly, when serverless really kind of like took off, there was always this problem of like cold starts and like having a warm start, and like it's like for a little bit Corey Quinn was like, why have a warm start if you're like just do it on a server, right? Like if you have a constantly running function, like there's no point really, in that, right? Yeah. Like that kind of defeats the purpose.
So I can't speak to the actual kind of advent of Quarkus, but this is one of the major differences between using Quarkus and a typical JVM engine, is that, and like I've seen the numbers too, and I'm trying to remember, but like, starting basically the same functionality on a typical JVM is like 10 seconds or something. And starting in Quarkus is like milliseconds.
Right.
So the trade-off, right, is that Quarkus is much more like a compiled language. There's certain things you can't do, which you might expect, etc. But so despite the hype with serverless, it is not for everything. It is not the right answer to all questions. Not all things look like a nail when you have a hammer. So keep that in mind. So that's kind of the serving component. The other component that I'll talk about next, which we're not really going to talk about very much today, is this idea of eventing. And so if you, and the eventing part of it is, I need a way of kind of doing the triggering, right? So it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. And so one of the really popular, kind of eventing things, actually there's two, at least for us, right? So there's Kafka, which is, what's funny is that the way it was originally presented to me a long time ago is, I'm sorry. So that's basically the Twitter Firehose, right? So, and one of the things that, unless you've ever done anything with the Twitter API, you wouldn't necessarily know, is it's actually very, very hard to get everything that happens on Twitter. They limit it to a very small group of customers, who I assume pay Twitter vast amounts of money or whatever.
I would assume so as well. I have not heard, but yes.
Right. And I think it's a closely guarded secret and everything else. So normally what you can get to, right, is you can kind of get to your own feed. But then there's basically, I think, an upper limit to the amount of kind of content you can get out of Twitter. thing is that even if it's just like my Twitter feed, which, has a few thousand followers, that's like a ridiculous amount of data coming in that you don't care very much about the vast majority of it. So Kafka is, I think, a tool developed originally by Twitter to simplify that, right? It was Twitter, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, it's Apache Foundation now, but
yeah. But now I'm like questioning myself.
Twitter or Lyft? I I
think it was Twitter.
Lyft did like Envoy.
Envoy, that's it.
Yeah. Never mind.
So yeah, long story short, Kafka is now very, very common as a way to do kind of high volume streamed events. Very, very popular for certain kinds of use cases. Like, I know I have a friend who works for one of the like food delivery online services. They use Kafka to basically manage all the inbound requests for the food orders, right?
Yeah. I mean, the streaming, eventing, the whole MQTT thing is just fascinating to me, and all the possibilities it can open up for folks is amazing, right? Like, drop anything on any bus you want, and off you go, right? That's just it's just a beautiful thing.
And that's actually to some extent where also enter Fuse, which I don't what's our product name for that, but whatever. So there's this
AMQ streams.
Yeah, maybe it's AMQ streams. But so basically, it's a piece of software that's been around for a long time. It's kind of more well known in the Java world, but basically it's this idea of, well, I'm getting events from all these different kinds of things. I want them all to go to the same place. I want to do transforms across them, et cetera. So, et cetera. So, hey, look at that. Is OpenShift going to do a FAAS? We even got a question in the
is OpenShift going to do a FAAS?
We literally are talking about it today. So yes, sort of. So the next thing, like many buzzwords, FAAS means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Function as a service is typically what it stands for. But again, it's a little bit questionable, like, what does function mean in that sentence, right? So, and that's the last part of the thing we ship as OpenShift serverless. Currently tech previews, so just kind of keep that in mind.
Keep that in mind. But
the other two pillars I just mentioned are GA, and the expectation is that the functions part is going to go GA soon. And yeah, so Knative is actually the upstream for the serving and eventing part of OpenShift serverless. And another project called Boson, BOSON, is the upstream for the functions part. They have other upstream stuff too, but think about it as the functions part. Right. So if you go,
sorry to interrupt you, but I believe we had, Nina Singh was on yesterday talking about serverless and serverless functions.
Okay.
I'll grab the link to that and drop it in chat for everybody.
So JP Dade mentions functions as a service as being roughly equivalent to AWS Lambda. And so that is one approach. Azure Functions, I think, it kind of does the same kind of model. And I want to say Google has one too, but I've never been able to figure out which one of their many products it is. But that's the idea of, I have some code and I'm going to plop it somewhere, and it will get run on demand. That's one approach to functions. The other approach to functions is, I have a container and I'm going to plop it somewhere and it's going to get run on demand. AWS offers that in Fargate, I think is the name of the product. Azure has one too, which is called something, run container on demand. I don't know. And so basically you kind of have these two halves of that, basically same goal, same outcome, same, whatever. But there's, at least the debate I've seen, right, is around which one is more functional. So you get a bunch of feature set from the fact that you can just drop code somewhere, which is super handy. Very hard to modify, extract, keep track of, reuse, things like that, because it's literally just, a piece of code on the internet. The other side of it is you have a container So you have a lot more flexibility in that you have one pipe in and you have one pipe out, but you kind of do whatever you want on the inside. You can reuse that container in ways that are not serverless functions if you wanted to, etc. So, but the barrier to entry in some ways is high, right? Because now you have to like develop a container and you have to make sure it lands in the right place. So, I'm kind of neutral on the debate, but the serverless functions thing that we're offering in OpenShift Serverless is the container style, which is what the Boson Funk project does upstream. So that's kind of where we're at and why we do it the way we're doing it. So I thought, unless there were more questions, that I thought we would kind of go through my little example.
Yeah, I was trying to find the Boson GitHub repo, but I'm having problems with that.
Oh, I think I might have that one open.
It keeps giving me stuff for Boston, which is not what I'm after. So change tact here. There's the Boson protocol, which I have. Okay, so Boson Funk should be in here. No,
find it. I know
this is not the same thing. All right. Anyways, you keep going. I'll look for it.
Okay. Actually, I might already have. Okay. That's Parliament, but I have the whole. Okay, so here's the whole Boson project in chat. Oops, somebody else just got Funk, I think.
Thank you. Yes.
Yep. That's the one.
That's what I couldn't remember. Was it Dash Project or not? No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, obviously, like every other open source project, there's a bunch of pieces to the one that but the one that is Funk, right? Or the one that the end user really consumes is Funk. Okay, so given that, let's go ahead and see if we can get started. And we'll do some screen sharing. So, where's the right screen? Oh,
you can do it. I believe
I can do it. Exactly. Its problem is background's white, so it doesn't stand out as much in amongst all the other things.
Amongst all the other brightly lit things on your screen.
Okay. So, actually, I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe this. All right, let's not start there. Let's start with OpenShift, because otherwise you won't have access to any of this because you haven't installed the operator. So, of course, there's no way to tell the difference between these two windows. I think it's this one. All right, so
there you go.
When you're doing something with OpenShift and it's like demo, right? I usually have to have two logins, or often have to have two logins, because I want to have like the cluster admin login, right? But then I want a real user login. So the way I do the real user login is as a private window. So like the only difference is the little private icon in Firefox. All right, so I'm not actually going to show you kind of the full on install. I'm just going to kind of show you the steps. But basically you go here and if you don't have cluster admin access, you go and petition your sysadmin gods to install Red Hat OpenShift Serverless. I've obviously already installed it. I am not going to uninstall it because that would make the talk
that would be bad, but
very bad. Yeah,
you can tell there are prereqs though, which is important to read and understand.
Yeah. So and a couple of, and actually, so this is where it's actually where we start to talk about some of the bugs I filed. One of the things that I find a little bit confusing. So we'll talk about more about where to get KN from in a minute. But keep in mind that this is correct, but I'm not sure I agree with this choice. But basically, these links in here are to the oldest supported version of OpenShift that the operator runs on.
Oh.
So this is a 4.7 instance of OpenShift. These go to if you can see in the URL at the bottom, these go to 4.6 docs.
Huh. That is something that is easily updated, though.
Well, except that should it be? Because like, so the operator is supposed to be independent.
If you're using 4.7, it should go to 4.7 docs.
That's kind of how I feel.
I don't know how to make the operator aware of that, but I know where to go to change the link.
Right.
If that makes sense,
exactly.
Right?
So I filed a bug about this, but basically the answer I got back was because it's the 4.6 version, because that's the oldest version it's supported on. Kind of throw that out there, and take that, the way you like. But keep it in mind, if you're actually running 4.7, you might want to switch, and it's pretty easy to switch, right? You theoretically can just switch to 4.7. I swear that didn't there used to be a little, like, there's a way to make this into a drop down.
Did that go?
It's like somehow about how I get to it, whether I get it as a drop down or whether I get it as a hard link.
Oh, you're in the access.red hat? That's why. If you go to docs.OpenShift, you get the drop down. If you go to the access pages, you get the bubble radio selection thing.
I see. That must be it.
The knowledge base is different layout than the docs.
Right.
Yeah,
so I prefer the drop down. The drop down, however, has the trade-off of sometimes when you pull the drop down, the thing doesn't still exist in the same titling and stuff. So, again, trade-offs. But okay, long story short, you go click the big old install button, wait for a bit. Then, like some operators, you kind of have to go to one more step. And actually, I will point out here potentially two steps. So because we're only talking about Knative serving, I'm only installing Knative serving. So one thing, and not, if you notice, Knative eventing. So even though I have like the capability of it, I don't actually have Knative eventing. Just like when I install the operator, I have the the ability for Knative serving, but not the actual implementation. So the Knative serving, when we're talking about serving, eventing, and functions, this Knative serving is the serving pillar, but it's what kind of holds up the function, right? So you need both, but you don't need Knative eventing unless you want to use that too. One thing to keep in mind is that when you go click this create Knative serving, you need to make sure you're in the Knative serving project, which you won't be by default when you do the install. So just keep that in mind. This is all covered in the installation guide, so follow the steps in the install guide. I definitely recommend it. I didn't run into any problems there aside from the 4.6, 4.7, like I said, maybe bug. So that's how you get the whole thing installed. Then we move on from there to actually like using it. Okay, so now our cluster administrator has said, yes, you're good. Here's some serverless for you.
Here's some serverless for you.
Exactly.
And hand you nothing.
Exactly.
Because there's no server.
Right. I hand you the capability of making. I don't know.
Anyways.
Yeah. All right. So now I will go back to my terminal to kind of show you. Okay. So now what I do with it. Some of this you can do in the UI, some of it you can't. The tool chain for doing this on the command line is so like simple that I didn't find it terribly usable. I didn't even really try to pull this off in the UI because it's literally like two commands. So I just kind of, did it this way. However, here's the next fun part. Oh, I should have shared differently. Maybe I should just switch to my full screen, even though it might be huge.
Just minimize whatever you need to do.
Yeah. Well, one of the things to minimize is us. Otherwise, we have the whole section.
Well, I mean, you could totally do that, but yeah.
All right. In theory, you should be seeing screen and terminal and everything else.
Got everything, yeah.
All right. Okay, so typically
everything's small though. Just keep that in mind.
Right. That's so typically to go and get like the OpenShift client, right? I have to like
OpenShift
every time. You go to command line tools here, right? And conveniently, there is a KN here. However,
not the
you don't want to
version.
use this one.
Oh God.
So this is where kind of I want to file some bugs. Again, one of those things where it looks to me like the engineers expected users to use a thing one way, and the docs authors expected people to use things a different way. And like a lot of software, you can use them two different ways. So KN, I can show you over here, actually has a plugin ability, whatever you want to call it.
Pluggability.
Yeah, so if I go get this KN, it will not include any plugins. However, I can also go get func, which is the boson func command. And yeah, so I can have them separate. So I can go get KN, which I can get from here. Func is not here. I have to go download that separately.
Okay.
But you can use them independently. But func can also be a plugin to KN. So OpenShift somewhere
over the rainbow.
Exactly. I was in the wrong syllable or window or something.
What's nice is, at the very least, though, when you go to the command line tools page, if you don't have OpenShift Serverless installed, it won't show you the client.
Right, which is nice.
That's kind of nice.
I think, and it might even be that it might even have been the two ships passing in the night problem of like originally when they were doing the KN stuff, they didn't need func because the func stuff is tech preview, but it's not that, so it's kind of this whole chicken and egg thing.
I'm assuming that once it goes GA, func would be there.
Right. And so, and to some extent, to make sure that somebody needs to know this, I need to go file bugs, right? Make sure that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
This is why I also need to hit bang future to remind folks that we're talking about things that are tech preview. If you do this in your own cluster and you call support, you might find that they will push back. If you do this in your cluster and if you do anything that you see on this channel in your cluster and you call support, tell them you saw it on OpenShift TV so they can come yell at me for not doing my job and telling you that this is tech preview. Yeah. So
and also to make sure that support knows that we have this whole channel here and they should come
no by they are sadly aware in not so great ways. Because in the past we have not done a good job of telling people that stuff is tech preview or don't do this on your production cluster kind of thing.
Right. So we've gotten much better. We don't we even have our our overlay warning now too? I know we talked about that.
Yeah, we do have it. Let me ping it real quick.
So I am putting it in the chat as well. But basically, if you go download the serverless clients from the build infrastructure, right? Rather than getting it from kind of the direct link out of OpenShift, this Knative install includes the plugin.
Okay.
Cool. So to be honest, this may not have been necessary, right? I might have been totally fine with func, but I wanted to kind of follow the directions coming from the docs, kind of as closely as possible, basically, so that I can go and file bugs if there's any bugs. And so, so I didn't actually experiment all that much with just using straight func. Your mileage may vary. Feel free to do whatever you like.
Func.
Yeah. So I downloaded that and then I basically created a new, a new symlink. And so now I have KN, but I also have KN-OS, which to me means I downloaded it from OpenShift. I don't ask me why. But so if I do that and run plugin list, you'll see I have the KN func plugin pre-built in. Okay. So going back to the very, very beginning of the show today, I wanted to throw out there. Oh, nice. Thank you, JP Dade. I appreciate when support comes and finds me
directly. To Langdon about the V8 devel location in the repos. They were unaware of that little.
This came up many episodes ago, but yes,
many episodes. Yeah.
So, all right. So what was I going to say?
So there is a KN func.
Yes, right.
From the client that you just sent us to. Yeah.
Exactly. And so going back to the very beginning of this episode where you were talking about kind of packaging, right? So one of my challenges, or one of the things I really dislike about it's not the popularity of Go per se, but so Go is what's referred to as statically linked versus dynamically linked. And statically linked means that when you get deployed, you bring all of your friends to the party with you. And so all those libraries that you depend on, you're statically linked to. So you bring them along. And that way you have one really nice feature, which is that you know exactly what version of the libraries you're getting. The downside to that is that if there is a bug fix or like a security issue or something like that in a library that is common across a lot of Go applications, you have to go update each of those applications individually. So this is in some ways why most of the Linux distributions do use package managers and use what they call unbundled packaging to distribute the applications. That said, so as a result, many of the Go application world, of which most, now we have, I don't know, what are there, like 50 different like Kubernetes Go tools, right? There's Knative, there's like I have them in my whole like OS clients thing that I was working on an episode a while ago. And I only have like 10 in there. There's Argo CD, all of these are statically linked. All of them are unrelated to each other. None of them are packaged. And so as a result, things like this, in my mind, things like this happen, right? So you have now multiple KNs in the wild that you can have issues with or whatever, that you can say, oh, you've got the wrong one. You can't just say get up to date because you're still wrong. So there it is. Take it or leave it, but this is one of the arguments for why packaging is important. And this is one of the examples of where it drops the ball when you don't use kind of proper packaging. So, okay, rants aside. So now what we do is we take a look at what Funk can do for us. And the first thing we can do is it has a nice scaffolding ability, especially when you're getting started. This is super handy. So you just give it create, you give it a language you want. You give it, of course, I can't remember the syntax. It's language, and then we need to give it a trigger. That's a T. So you say Python, and then as it's been a while since I did a lot of typing, so this should go. This should be fun. Actually, let me just. I just want to make it all in one place. And then you give it, and hopefully this is legible. If it's not,
if you can't read it, let me know, folks.
So if I also like to try to push it up towards the top of the screen. Oh, and now we have to give it a name. So what we're going to do, okay, so to back up a little bit, I actually mentioned it on an episode, a couple episodes back. One of the things that, so I use Telegram to communicate with my family along with a lot of other people. And when I want to share a link with my family, I often want to strip the marketing content out of the URL, right? So that I can just give them the bare URL.
Right.
And that's a pain, right? Usually, you can go and like edit it, but doing it on my phone or whatever is a lot harder than, like doing it on a laptop or whatever is fine, but doing it on my phone is a pain. So what I wanted to do was create a little Telegram bot that I could send a URL to, and it would send me back the, the cleaned up version. So, so we'll just call it clean URL.
And so when you say, the marketing cruft after it, right? Like there's often campaign IDs and things like that. That means stuff that are things that people want to track, as far as like, if you share the link, please use these parameters behind it so that we can track it accurately kind of thing. And some people don't like to be tracked.
Well, and there's certain conditions where I want to be tracked and some I don't, right? So this is kind of the idea behind, or the argument for and against ad blockers, right? It's like a lot of the internet is free because they surface advertising. If you use ad blockers, you're not paying them, or at least you're not paying them that particular thing. So, I use ad blockers sometimes, basically where I want to kind of, if I want to give it back, right? Or I will continue to use like fully loaded marketing links and everything else when I'm kind of browsing around the internet myself. But when I pass it to my kids, this is a different person, and their kids. So it is definitely a trade-off, and something to keep in mind, right? That you don't, every time you kind of clean a URL, every time you use an ad blocker, you're changing your relationship with whatever source you're using. And
I would even say they're not ad blockers anymore. They're actually like content blockers, right? Like they will block whole JS libraries from loading, the whole 9 yards. And that's great if you like, a lightweight web, right? Like, I think we all would appreciate a lighter weight web, given
unless you have experienced the lightweight web of like web.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember the Web 1.0 days, back when I could actually build a web page that looked good. The second CSS replaced tables, it was game over for me.
I totally hear you.
But I mean, and these are things that like I use judiciously, right? Like, because like, for example, I use the browser Brave, which has a lot of ad and content blocking bits in it. But it breaks websites sometimes, and they have a report broken website button in just about every tool that I use nowadays. So,
I actually, I also like to use like what they call a privacy VPN.
There you go.
Which I have, I think like most people kind of my age or whatever, I have now a lot of different bank accounts at a lot of different places, from like prior jobs or like whatever. And I have at least 2 that will not let me in if I am on the private VPN with no explanation either, which is also
often I've seen that they block IP blocks from like big data centers, right? Because they don't want some kind of massive attack to hit them from AWS. So AWS publishes their IP ranges so you can actually block them for some applications.
Right.
Which kind of breaks your VPNs, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I have a VPN just like you do, right? Like, but it's mine. It's not a service. So
right.
Yeah. I hit that
so
occasionally.
I don't know.
As well.
Your mileage may vary. All right. So we ran the crate statement, and we end up with this nice set of stuff in here. The first thing to look at is this YAML file. Which is basically like, oh, you probably could have guessed that, except for this builder and builder map stuff. Okay, so
what's that?
So if you've ever used S2I or
source to image for those that
source to image, which was big in, did that start with OpenShift 3, I guess, or was it in OpenShift? No, it was in 3.
It was in 3. Yeah.
So source to image is an approach to this. Basically, this is the kind of thing that turns an OpenShift into a PaaS, like so a platform as a service, rather than a something that's closer to an IaaS or an infrastructure as a service. Because what it does is it says, okay, I know how to build Python projects for this kind of scenario, for all that generic stuff that you as the end developer don't care about. Okay, you care about it sometimes or a little bit, but mostly about how it works, not about replacing it.
Right.
So what this is doing is essentially providing a PaaS for sorry, I'm very coffee today.
I just ran out of coffee, by the way.
Oh, I am also, I think, out of coffee. So we should be wrapping this up soon, I think. But so
we have actually 18 minutes. We're just drinking coffee faster than normal today.
Oh, that's good. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the code yet. So that's probably
let's get to it.
All right. So this is kind of the PaaS part of it. The nice thing about that little create statement is it knows what to go look for. One thing I noticed in here is that while I was working on this project, they actually I believe, released a new version of some of the FAAS components. So like,
Ooh.
I think it was this one here. So, and I don't know how, but it decided to drop in a tag here. So I wasn't getting the latest version anymore. And so then it started to break in mysterious ways. So keep that in mind. If, keep an eye on this YAML file, even though you don't really need it very much, it does get changed by the various operations we're going to do, and sometimes not for the better. So
okay,
just keep an eye on it. Or the other kind of thing too is like as a longtime developer, what I end up with is like a stack of things I check when things are just behaving weirdly. One of the simplest ones, right, is, are you out of disk space? Because a lot of times you get weird stuff happening when you're out of disk. So go check.
I think that's unique to you too.
That could be. And but I have an even more fun example of that in a second. So that's one of those. So the one that I think may also be a thing is that it also tags the image digest when you update it. So if, like, on the list of when things are behaving oddly, I go clear that, I make sure this doesn't have a tag on it, and that seemed to make things better. So just kind of some tips of, how to avoid, those kind of inexplicable errors that are just basically about, something to do with your build system, not with your actual code. You have, at least me, right? I have plenty of other problems without that being something I want to mess with. So then it generates you this template func file. And so the keyword is func.py. So the file has to be called that, or maybe that's settable somewhere, but I haven't found it yet. But that's the default. Basically, you end up with this context object. One thing to keep in mind is that there is another Python project called Parliament that is not the one we're talking about here. This is actually Parliament-functions. So just if you're going to look
not
for it,
confusing at all.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, yeah, keep that in mind. It basically just shoves a Flask request object and this cloud event object, if you have one. This is part of where the eventing stuff comes in. So if it comes in as an event, it'll actually come in as a cloud event. But imagine it's basically just, a 2-item array. One is a Flask request object and one is a cloud event. Except everything that I've done so far has not had a cloud event. It was just the Flask object because I'm doing simple, kind of HTTP stuff.
Nice.
All right, so that's all of that. What I was going to show you now was, if I can find the window, the actual code. So
I like code.
So here's my function. This is my YAML file, right?
Right.
It's the downside doing things
a little
with containers. Really?
Yeah, I can't read it, dude.
Okay, because I actually went through and was like, this is a pretty good size font. Oh yeah.
Just Control++.
Does that work?
Should.
Oh yeah, that one does.
Okay. Now I can read it.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is, remember a few episodes ago, I found like a profile switcher for VS Code. So I finally got it working and all set, and can switch now between my like normal view and my video view. Cool. So I just got to remember to go tweak it a little bit to maybe go one more notch up.
Yeah, that's all.
So if you notice, I have already deployed this thing or whatever. I'm trying to think how to explain this. Okay, so this was added by my build infrastructure.
Right.
This was also added by the build infrastructure. And then as you notice, I don't have those tags that I was worried about before.
Right.
But we have the actual code here. Nice. So what lands in here, right, is so I get this context object just like before, and I probably should have updated the comment. I didn't get around to it. One thing to keep in mind is I was having a lot of trouble getting logging info out of the Python library and into some place I could read it. So if I tried a print statement, that did not work. even though that's typically the container debugging model. The only thing that I found that I was having good luck with getting data out of it was in my actual bot. So the way this is designed is I have a function as a service that is a URL cleaner. All it does is takes a URL in, uses this cool library I found that actually does URL cleaning. Actually, what it does first is it actually unshortens it first.
Nice.
Then it cleans it.
Nice.
Then it gives it back to you.
Cool.
And so it's actually a group who maintains a browser plugin who does URL cleaning before you click on any links. That browser plugin turns around and actually has an independent library for Python that lets you do just the cleaning. Yeah, I was super excited. I thought I was going to have to do it really manually in my hand. So I found this really nice library. It seems pretty good. Yeah. It's just called Unilix.
I
forgot to think to myself.
Keep in mind, time is of the essence here.
Right. Okay. So, but I think this is it. So check it out. Clear URLs. That's the browser plugin.
Yeah.
But so it has a community around it and stuff like that. So the URLs cleaning gets better over time, basically. So what do I do here? Oh, so what I wanted to show you was with the logging. Oops. This bot that I was trying to get, the actual bot side of it, which is the part where, Telegram, I send a message to a Telegram bot that then in turn basically sends a webhook message to your target URL. That target then, has a blob of content, and then you basically massage that into, I mean, you don't have to, but like Telegram actually ships a Python library for dealing with the Telegram bot messages. Nice. So you massage the inbound request into the Telegram bot object. Then you can kind of interact with it and say, okay, let me look down here. I'll show you where it does it. But basically it says up there, here, go construct the URL, then do the URL request, right? Then once I get a response back, then you basically send the bot a message back with the clean URL, right? So pretty straightforward, right? Like basically you have two serverless functions, one that does URL cleaning, one that responds to bot commands. So in theory, if I wanted to go make, I don't know, does WhatsApp, like are bots on WhatsApp a thing? I don't know. But let's say there's WhatsApp bot, I can go use the same URL cleaner with a different bot, right? So I wanted to separate those two functions. But in the headache of trying to figure out, because the problem with doing a lot of this stuff, and this goes to where it might have been actually useful to go and install service mesh, because this is where the problem of distributed tracing really shows its head, shows its face, right? Which is that I have all these different services, right? I have Telegram, the organization, who then has a bot that you actually interact with to do your bot commands. And actually, I can even show you. But you can. Sorry, I'm just getting
angle something.
Window.
There you go. Fine.
But so what you do is you actually interact with your bot by calling the bot father bot and sending it commands to set it all up.
Telegram's bot father is quite interactive and fun.
Yes. And so you can see it has a bunch of different commands here. But then I have this bot called URL Cleaner Bot. And as you can see, I'm sending it a number of messages trying to figure out what exactly is getting thrown over the wall from Telegram into my serverless function, and then what damage is being done to the object that it received, and how can I then massage that into something else. And so what do you need for that? You need logging, right? I want to be able to print everything and its brother about what's going on. And so what I did was So I fooled around with print, then I started to fool around with logger, and I can get logging if I use a logger declared this way. And this set level seemed to have no effect whatsoever.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
The only messages I could get it to print were warning and error. And so I stuck with warning, just because.
Sure.
And I also was trying to get it to like pretty print essentially objects rather than getting them directly, because I don't care about the object handle. What I care about is like what's in the object. So that's kind of the bot itself. But going back to my little clean URL thing, so this thing works really quite well because I'm getting a very simple get request, which I'm basically getting in the URL. Then I can pull the Flask object out of the context, get this rec object. Then I can dig into that, and there I have one get parameter called URL. And so basically make sure that the dirty URL actually has some content to it, et cetera. I do a little bit of error handling. It probably could use more, but then go and do the actual cleaning and then give it back. So that's pretty straightforward. So if we go back to our thing over here, I am just going to copy over this code that you're looking at, because obviously I messed around with this a lot already. And let's just say star.
Let's say, what are you trying to copy to? There we go.
Yes. Okay, cool. So now the thing is, what I don't have though is I don't have any place for it to land in OpenShift. So I need to do OC new project, and let's just call it clean URL level up hour. Okay, so now I have a project there, and that's the bulk of what I kind of need to do regarding OpenShift. Because now what I can actually do, which is super handy, is just want to make sure this is going to work. Yeah, it should. So I do I use the special Knative that has Func as a plugin, and then I do what's called a build. And I can do a -v, so you can kind of see all of it. This is, oh, shoot. What is it? Sorry, export. There we go. Nope, not yet. There it is, of course. Control Shift R. There we go. Okay, so we actually covered this on the show some couple of episodes ago. Podman recently released the ability to act as a REST endpoint that looks like the Docker REST endpoint.
Yes.
However, you have to turn it on.
Yeah.
And I think I actually can do this at the system level, but I just didn't get to it. So the simple version is basically just run this as a system service, listening on port 1234. Yeah, so to Lost Algorithms point, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't know where that object is landing or what exactly is going on there. It's kind of weird. Okay, so I clearly already have the system service running. It's just that I lost my environment variable.
Right.
So Docker host just needs to be told that this is where it is, right? Yeah. So that should work now. Theoretically, okay, cool. So then it goes and pulls, basically the builder component. So the platform. Oh, sorry, what I never got to was when we were talking about SGI and all that stuff. This platform thing is what's called a build pack. Yes. And a build pack has its own whole set of uses. So Boson and Func are just leveraging this other project called build pack. With which they don't have any formal affiliation that I'm aware of. Maybe
they're a CNCF project, I think.
Right. I'm just mean like Boson's not build pack is completely independent of Boson. Maybe there's humans that happen to be on both projects, but they're independent things. Build pack has its own mission. So build packs, there's lots of different build packs, different use cases for build packs. Maybe we'll cover build packs in a different show, but that's a different show. Okay, so now what I did was I built my container. So now if I look in Podman images, I have a new container, except this is something I haven't figured out yet. I'm not sure why we're getting 41 years ago, because I know I just built this.
Wait,
or actually, I guess it's this
41 years ago.
Yeah, isn't that weird? I was trying to figure it out.
Is your clock wrong? What's the date on this thing?
I don't think so.
Jeez Louise.
Because every other container is correct.
That's weird.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, it's UTC. It's not.
I mean, that's right.
Other than that. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird. And like, if you look at see, if you look at the Boson container, it's fine. Oops. Move back to the team up selection problem. But yeah, if you look at this container, it's fine. It's something about how the KN func build thing is building that it's like injecting the wrong date somehow. It's very weird. I haven't figured that one out yet. Okay, so I built it. Basically, I have the image. It's tagged in here, right, with the remote target. So one of the things that I kind of glossed over a little bit is that I would have been prompted for where do I want this container to land,
right?
Ultimately, because obviously, if I build the container just on my laptop, it's not going to be useful to anyone, right? Because you can't get to my laptop from the public internet, which is where the OpenShift is from. So, if you have a data center or whatever with a shared registry, or even using your OpenShift server as a shared registry, you can use that as your target. But for this, I knew it was all public, and so I just used it on Quay, and so that was fine. One thing I wanted to kind of pause and mention here, though, because this burned me a little bit, is that by default, when you use this mechanism to create your repository, so it will go and actually fully create the Quay location. The problem is it will create it private, because by default Quay creates
it is private by default. Yeah.
Which then, if you go and try to deploy it to OpenShift, it says I can't find it. Yeah. So you just kind of have to keep in mind when you do that build or whatever, it will create it, and then you need to go log into Quay, make it public, then come back and do your deploy, and then things will go less badly. All right, so now we can conveniently, and this is kind of what I was getting at before, is that this is really simple. One thing I want to point out is you can do a -v here. However, another weird bug I ran into that seems to have gone away is that if I ran it with -v and I had to log into Quay, which I should have to do, it will fail silently. Oh, actually, I have another one too. It will fail silently. If I don't use the verbose, it works perfectly, which is like the weirdest thing I've seen in a long time. But I'm not sure that bug still happens. If you're not sure if that's happening or not, what I did to stop having to type in my password over and over again was I just logged in to Quay via Podman.
Yeah.
And I think it's like this. And so I wouldn't have to get prompted every time. So now I can just do a func deploy, and it should, with -v, just
building image.
So yeah, but largely it's already built because I didn't make any changes. And then, so going back to the disk space thing, I'll show you as soon as this finishes pushing. It usually doesn't, it really doesn't take very long.
We need to do points at some point too, by the way.
Oh, right, yeah. So one thing I want to point out quickly, if I can, is we have actually created a whole project. Not that one, this one. And if you notice, it created a whole project. Or sorry, I did a new project to get to the project itself. Sorry, it created a whole new, like service and topology. And then it deployed this container as a pod there, and gave it a route and all of those things. So all of that stuff happened behind the scenes. This is one of the reasons I kept, like, it took me a while to figure out the whole Quay private thing, because basically the whole thing was just done for me. And then, but it didn't work, right? And I couldn't figure out why. So just keep that in mind. The other thing that is fun, speaking of disk space, when it does these builds, it's making these directories in temp.
Oh.
And doesn't clean them up. So I assume there's some sort of caching going on there. However, if you run out of space in temp, which, I got 4 gigs there, takes a little bit, but not forever. If you try to build, it will fail, and fail, like it'll fail with a message, but it won't error out. So for example, if I do something like this, which is what I usually get to when I'm doing a lot of debugging, right, is like, okay, let me try this, rebuild, redeploy. This will continue to work.
New thing every time you do that.
So it creates a new image util thing, like we were talking about, and it will redeploy it, and that's all good. That's exactly what I want.
Right.
However, eventually, when the temp runs out of disk, build will fail, but not error. So it won't trigger the and it will proceed to deploy. The deploy doesn't fail because the container is there, and it is just expecting, it just thinks you want to do a redeployment of the same thing. So that's annoying, and I will definitely be finding a bug for that one.
Yeah, and there's a question about, does it clean up itself? Does it purge?
No, and and that was the annoying thing. The cleanup is, I guess I don't have it. It's not my history. But no, it's rm-rf image util local. And that was the only way to clean it, which, to be honest, I was really, like, I actually did a backup of them first, destroyed them, tried it again to make sure I didn't just completely like bork knative or something. So I completely annoying. So I plan to go file some bugs about this. Both the biggest one is, I think, that it doesn't error, right? It just throws a message.
It doesn't throw an exit code higher than 0.
And so that was fun, to put it nicely. All right, so, but now it's all deployed, which is cool. However, if you notice, the little blue ring, if you're familiar with OpenShift at all, the little blue ring's gone. Why is the little blue ring gone? Because it's undeployed, because we auto scale to 0 after a timeout.
Nice.
So this is cool because it will also auto scale the other way. And we should see it. Yeah, so now it's blue again. And I got basically my error message. And if we do URL, I do have an I there. URL equals, I don't know, google.com. And I can remember how URLs work. Right? Question mark? Yeah. Why? Oh, so this is the problem that makes it hard to test. It's just you have to UU encode anything you put into it, right? Because otherwise the browser tries to interpret it and whatever. So I just, whoa, wait. I don't mean UU encode. I mean URL encode. I mix them up all the time. Does nobody else do that? I mean, they sound so similar. Like I have to think about it. All right, so that's better. Now, if I plop that in here with URL equals, it should do its thing correctly. And there we go. So it gave me the, conveniently enough, the URL is the same. And if you notice, basically it's been spinning up new containers kind of or a new, new running container every time. Yes, JP date, exactly. Please put the toys back when you are done.
Yes, exactly.
So there's my little URL cleaner, but let's pause there for a second and look at points. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Now I have to find the
I was about to say,
oh, here it is.
Do you know where you put them?
Here they are. Here they
Yay!
are. And then, so we have
screen that or maximize it or whatever.
Yeah,
there you go.
Nice and big right now.
There you go.
All right, so
everybody likes the neon lights, man.
Exactly. With 6,000 points, Netherlands Hackham with 5,600 points. No friction, I think, with no change, and maybe Joe Fuzz both with no change at 4,000 and 2,300. Detective Conan Kudo up another episode or so, as well as Bacon Fork. Thank you again so often for participating in the sweet internet points. We're always excited to give them out. And those should be the correct codes. Let me just see if I can grab a URL for you so that I can drop that in the chat.
Thank you.
Waiting for it to load, sorry. Usually I have a cheat sheet, but I forgot to do it today. All right, so there is the code for today's episode. Please go and file the form and collect your internet points. And we're always very excited to get them out. Someday we'll have swag. We think maybe.
Maybe.
Exactly.
Possibly.
So there is that, and I'll close this. And I wanted to just mention just like a little bit more, which quickly before we close the show out, if you're continuing to try to debug this, you have to race the blue line, right? So.
Oh, that's right. Because every time you do it, it's gonna run and then be done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is actually something I fundamentally disagree with, kind of with how OpenShift kind of approaches this, is that I should be able to easily get to the logs of a thing that oops, that didn't work at all. Of a thing that I kind of did in the past,
but is now gone.
Like,
yeah,
I don't care why it's not there anymore.
Kubernetes thing, right? Like,
yeah,
the second the pod's gone, the logs are gone with it.
And, exactly.
Yeah.
I cannot cut and paste it.
Wow, you were like dropping in all kinds of weird code.
On it. Yeah. On it. Okay, so let's see. OC logs. It's probably going to be gone by the time I actually get to it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I may also file a bug about, but this one's tougher, is if I'm doing something like this. Oh, actually, I don't know if this thing's going to have any logs because I don't think I actually write anything to the log. But the other one sends out a lot of messages because it still doesn't work right. So I haven't cleaned out the debug messages. One of the things, I was just going to say something else about this. So one of the other things that I may kind of go file a bug about is this construct here is also kind of annoying. Or maybe I'll I need to find a way to write, it's not an alias, but a bash function. Because what you also can't do is I can't deconstruct this and get this, because user container has to come after this. Because otherwise I could say something fancy like,
oh, well, look at you.
$1.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could do like xargs OC logs, and I could even put user container here, but I can't put it after particularly easily. So yeah, so that's kind of annoying. This is one of those huge complaints about systemd when it came out, and even today, right? So if you do system control, restart. I'm going to intentionally make a mistake there. Network manager. It's hard to do that in a bash script because you can't, because the keyword, the changing thing is in the center of the command, which is much harder to script around than when it's on the end. So if you remember how service worked, it would be, oh my goodness, network manager restart. So it seems like a stupid little thing, but that's actually a pain for scripting. Same with this logs thing. The running joke about this is that whoever designed this command line interface, that was a developer versus a command line interface designed by a system administrator.
That's pretty much been the complaint about systemd the whole time, I think.
Yeah,
like
right.
It boils down to that, I feel like, and
right,
to a certain extent. Yeah.
Would so lost algorithm says I can embed it in the middle. The problem is if I have multiple pods,
right,
it won't work. Or I don't think it'll work, because I don't think you can give it more than one pod at a time, if that makes sense.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So
I don't think you can give it a list.
Try it.
So I don't think that'll work.
I don't either. Oops. Wait. Now I screwed it all up. OC logs. OC get pods. My bash is not actually all that good too, so just keep it.
Just bash. Don't be afraid of the Reaper.
Yes. Oh well. So that time it was blank, because I bet it's sleepy now. Yeah. See, it's gone again. So this is a little bit of the annoying headache. I could obviously wake it back up and kind of all that stuff. But long story short, it's a little bit of a pain. You start to get the hang of it, and I think a nice I have a lot of what do they call them? Bash functions, right? So writing a new one with basically you can have full commands in there. So doing that to get to the logs is not too big a deal. It was just kind of annoying. So your mileage may vary. But so hopefully this was a good little intro to how to do some serverless stuff completely like from zero.
Right.
And you should totally go check it out. I maybe we'll do a future episode with the bot stuff, but all of this is either currently on my GitHub or will be. Obviously, the bot for Telegram doesn't quite work yet, but I want to finish it because I actually have a real use case for this cleaning of the URLs thing.
Right.
So I will finish it, and as soon as I'm finished, I'll push it up on GitHub. And then you can go and run your own, obviously, because the Telegram bot, both the good thing and the bad thing, right, is that you can't you can't run it for somebody else, right? All these bots aren't out there running that anybody can use necessarily, but you can go run it yourself on your favorite OpenShift instance, or one thing that I haven't done a lot of experimenting with, but I think you might be able to do is you could actually run it in Podman. So I don't know. It would be interesting, but it doesn't give you any of the capabilities that OpenShift would in this case, like the auto scaling, right off the bat. So it's not quite the same, but at least the same. But it's one of the other things. Kind of going back to the original arguments about the serverless, being just a blob of code versus serverless being a container. It's that reuse thing, right? It's like I could just go run this container anywhere, as long as I call it correctly. It should just work. I don't need any of the there's none of the vendor lock of like AWS Lambda, which vendor lock is nice, but it has trade-offs, right? That you're vendor locked. But I think that's about it. Really? Lost Algorithm says that they think with XArgs, you can actually embed where the thing coming into the XArgs goes. I did not know that. That is certainly possible and seems logical, but I have not played with that. I may go try that because it would come in handy. All right. I think that's the show. Cool. What else is coming up today? or this
well, coming up here at 11, we have Ask an OpenShift Admin. We're going to be talking about the new bits in OpenShift 4.8 for administrators. And then that's it. Basically 45 minutes from now. And then at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC, we are going to talk about troubleshooting RHEL. And I know that is a wide and open topic, but we're going to break some stuff and we're going to show you how to fix it.
so you don't just reboot? That's not
no, it is not one of those things that you do to fix things in Linux. No.
Exactly.
Did you turn it on and off again? Network gear, Windows boxes, and I don't know, not Linux.
Cell towers.
Cell towers, yeah.
Yeah. That's one of those, like, I feel like a failure as a person if I have to resort to rebooting my laptop because something's not working.
Right.
If
it's like code going awry, it's still one of those things where it's like, I could clean this up, or just kill everything and restart.
That's what's funny about that temp directory.
I bet that fits you. Yeah.
I actually did a reboot. That was the way originally. I was like, let me try. Oh, that's what it was. I think I backed it up and then I rebooted because reboots clear temp, right? To see if it would work.
Set that way.
Well, right, by default. And so basically just see how important those things were, because if they were important, they wouldn't be sitting in temp in theory.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, it was. I did actually end up rebooting the Vagrant image to try to solve for that problem. All right, cool.
All right. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. I'm going to send this last message to Lost Algorithm, and y'all have a safe and joyful day. How about that? So take it easy, and I will talk to you in a few, Langdon. Bye, everyone.